Imagine waking up and you don't own your home anymore. I have never heard of deed theft in my life, but it's one of the most least understood and most devastating forms of fraud in the US. It doesn't require someone breaking into your home, just filing paperwork. Welcome to the Playbook with Coach Rod. All right. Welcome, my good friend Sabine Franco.
Hi,
How you doing?
I'm good. How are
Sabine,
you?
you're no stranger to us, right? We've had you on Black Dad Unfiltered podcast.
Yes.
But for people who are listening to the Playbook with Coach Rod, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, about your business, what your specialty is?
Sure. I'm an attorney. I practice law in the state of New York and New Jersey. My primary area of law that I practice is estate planning. So I help people put together strategies for their assets, whether it's to make sure that they're preserving their assets for their lifetime or to make sure that their assets are providing generational wealth for their loved ones. So we put strategies in place, vehicles in place to make sure that we achieve their ultimate goals.
All right. Awesome. Awesome. So, again, I'm excited to have this conversation
Mhm.
um, because until recently, I've never heard of this thing called deed theft,
Mm.
right? Where I can wake up one morning and no longer own my home. So, for our listeners, can you give us some legal definition of deed theft?
Yeah, so deed theft is a form of fraud. It's where someone illegally transfers ownership of a property without the true owner's knowledge or consent. Sometimes it can happen where the owner does sign, but it was either under duress, which means they were forced to do so, or they were manipulated or tricked into signing. But oftentimes it is through forgery, where someone is, fraudulently and forging someone's name, and then they're recording that new deed as if it was, transferred to them or rightfully given to them, and that shows up in the county records of wherever that property is located.
So, so what I'm understanding from what you said is
Mhm.
someone can just sign paperwork, sign my name, go to my local county, a government agency,
Mhm.
and well, it's fraud, so it's illegal. But
Legal, yeah.
at that moment, actually get ownership of my. How is this not detected at the onset? How is like when I buy my home, and you've worked with me in some of my own personal stuff, the
Mhm.
amount of notaries I have to sign and get signed and witnesses. How is the transfer of home easier in this case?
It's easier because well, the legal transfer of the home is the actual deed paper, right? The deed document.
Mm-hmm.
However, what most states do is that they have the requirement for it to be recorded. And so they have a dual sort of, I guess, checks and balances, because if someone just steals your deed, you don't want them to now just be the owner, right? If they have the physical paper.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't put as much physical paper as we do in the actual recording, because the last to record is usually the one that we all, rely on. However, that system of recording is really administrative for the courts, right? So they're just making sure that you have all the right information in the right places and you have all the signatures, but they're not really going the extra mile to really verify outside of a notary. So if you have a notary, they're like, okay, it was notarized, someone who has a license
Mm-hmm.
attests to this. Now you have issues where there are notaries who are not doing the right thing when they are, participating in the fraud. And in those cases, they're just as liable as the person who is doing the fraud.
All right. So warning to those people who are notarizers or whatever it's called.
Mhm.
We're coming to get you, right? But
Mhm.
but let's stay down this rabbit hole. Like, so what's the impact to me now? Not besides me not owning my home. Like, how does I can only imagine the stress. But what do I do now?
That is such a challenging part of this whole thing. What most people do if they know the person, so if they find out about the deed theft while they're alive, right? They then can go to the person and basically threaten legal action against them and have them, sign the deed back over. That could be challenging, right? As you can imagine.
Mhm.
And if that doesn't happen, then they typically will have to go through various channels. One, get the DA's office involved, which is difficult. It's not that they don't want to do it, but obviously that's low on the totem pole of crimes. So that's
Yeah.
going to take some time. You go to the court, you can have the court reverse it. That's going to be sort of like a lawsuit. It's called a quiet title action.
Mm.
And show proof that this was not done correctly and that you'd like to have this removed of the record, right? So
Yeah.
then it wouldn't show up in the record. So the judge has to write an order after evaluating the proof and making sure that that's correct. Then they would instruct the clerk's office, who has the records, to either remove it from the record or file something saying that deed was void, and then the new deed has to be then filed.
Wow, that seems like a lengthy process.
Yeah, it can take up to 3 years, depending
What?
on, to get it reversed. Mhm.
So I have my home. I've been paying my mortgage. Someone decides to commit fraud, and it can take me up to 3 years. When I hear 3 years, I'm Black. I just hear a lot of money
Yes.
to get back what was rightfully mine. Like I have to prove that
Mhm.
this is actually my property. In the meantime, in that 3 years, am I like, do I have any exposure? Is it, I've been hearing a lot in the news that what do the courts do when they put a stop to something and you can't do anything? Like,
Oh,
is there,
that they would, freeze it?
yeah, is there any way to like stop any transaction, or this person who technically owns the deed, can they still do things against my property?
They could if you don't get something filed in the court sooner than later. What you could do is you can file a list pendens yourself. So this is like a document saying I have an interest in this property. You
Mm,
can file that in court and or in the land records of the property and
hmm.
say, to show proof that you have interest in the property. So therefore, if the person tries to sell it for market value, or they're going to try to, take money out of the property and things like that, that will show up in the records and therefore they'd be stopped. So you can do something like that to make sure that further damage is not happening, but you still have to go through the proper channels to get your deed back. Mhm.
You said something that was interesting.
Mhm. Was it about the
So
list?
the list pendants, but what it stops someone from selling my home at market value. And so the
Yeah.
reason why that struck a chord with me is I actually heard a story of this. My father was talking to me today, and he told me how his friend's house was sold.
Mm.
So that tells, and I'm like, I own the house. How can this be sold right underneath my feet? I own my house. I'm paying the mortgage company,
Right.
right? Like, so why?
What happens in that
Yeah,
case?
no, I'm just sitting here like, how does it even happen? Like, how do I not know? Like, how I'm paying a mortgage. How does this happen without me knowing? Like, how does
Yeah.
this fly under the radar? I guess is the question.
Because, well, the mortgage companies are not really policing what's happening with the titles of the properties, even though they have an investment in it, but they're not really policing that because for them, they still have a lien regardless, right?
Mm,
No matter
mhm.
what happens with that changing of title, that lien is still on that particular property. So they're not policing it. And most times we're not double checking what's going on with our deed, right? We almost never look back to that. And most people don't even know that the recording is what's the most important part. Most of the
Mm.
times, as far as my clients, they think that the paper is the most important part, like having that paper in hand, when it's fine, but once it's recorded, no one's ever asking you for your original deed, really.
So, so now, because this I do know,
Hmm.
right? Is once it's recorded, it's public record.
Yes.
So again, because I do this every time I'm with a lawyer. I want to talk legalese. I want someone Spanish. Everything is todo bien, right?
Mm.
I just
Right.
right, but I almost feel like the government's complicit
They
because
are. Mhm.
right because the only way someone can know to forge my name is to find out that I'm the owner right? And so that seems to be a mechanism in this process is where, it's public record. This is how they find me.
Right.
They source me. And then once they get if I'm understanding this, once they record it, they now have, although it's fraud, but until then, legal rights to the property, which means they can take out equity from my home.
Mm-hmm.
Can they evict me from my own home?
So that's going to be because in order to evict you, they have to go through illegal channels usually to evict you. And
Mm-hmm.
so you would obviously want to bring that up in court that, wait a minute, this is my house. If you check the records, you
Mm-hmm.
can see that I was a prior owner because they can't erase you from the records. I was a prior owner. I did not sell my house. I did not sign my deed. I didn't do this. So this is
Gotcha.
legal. So that they probably wouldn't be as bold, but where they usually go after people is elderly people because
Mm.
they're older. They might just get the deed and just wait for them to pass away. And then once they pass away, the family is like, what's going on? You know what I mean? And by now, it's going to be really hard to prove because the person's gone.
Wow.
So it's hard to prove what legally happened. And that's how they get away with things. So
My heart is broken. The fact that they can get away with this.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's a cautionary tale to people who are older with your record keeping. There has to be some level of, you're not thinking you have to do this. You're not thinking that I'm
Right.
a law abiding citizen. I've paid my mortgage, and because I'm older now, someone's preying on me. But let's stay down that path, right? Because
Mhm.
as I was preparing for this, conversation,
Mhm.
one of the things that came up with senior citizens most targeted because they tend to not have any mortgages or liens. Their property is free and clear. So what makes a property being free and clear attractive?
Well, so like I said before about the mortgage companies still
Mm-hmm.
having their lien regardless,
Mm-hmm.
even if you steal that property, if you steal the deed, steal ownership fraudulently, you're still going to be responsible for that mortgage, or that mortgage has to be paid, or the mortgage company can foreclose and take
Mm-hmm.
it. So unless you're gonna like try to sell it to somebody else, with that lien on there and try to hide that, like how deep or how far you're going with this fraud,
Got you.
you're still going to have that mortgage that's on that property. So when there is no mortgage, it's very attractive because it's like, all right, I just stole $1,000,000, $600,000, whatever the value of that property is. Oftentimes, for some reason, I guess people don't realize that's what you have is that amount of money invested in this property. And that's how vulnerable it is.
Oh wow. So people underestimate the value of the home they're living in, but to
Yes.
someone else, they see the dollar signs.
Yes.
Right. So
Mhm.
are there any other communities that you see in your experience or in your research that are also vulnerable?
Yeah, so you have vacant properties. So if people see that there are, vacant properties, nobody's living there, they'll probably go look in the land records and see who this is. If somebody who had received an inheritance, right, but they haven't maybe even done anything with it yet, that could be vulnerable because they might think, well, does this person not know that they own this property, or maybe they don't care, or what have you. It could be somebody who's well off and they have this property as a
Yeah.
evidence, but they're just not, sort of doing anything with it. So those can be vulnerable. You have owners who are out of state, right? They're not here. I know of a story where someone inherited a property, Central Park South. I don't know if I told you about this.
No.
It was an apartment overlooking Central Park. They inherited it. They lived out of state. They hired a lawyer here in New York to do the
Uh-huh.
probate. The lawyer stole the property from right underneath them and was giving them the runaround. They didn't even know they had to, they ended up finding out that the property was sold from right underneath them. So we're talking about millions of dollars. So this is like a major crime,
Yeah, of course.
you
And
know.
so that major crime will get the attention of police officers, right?
Yeah,
So
you could at least get the bar you get the bar
yeah.
involved, you get the person prosecuted and all that stuff.
Mhm. But you may never get your home back.
You may not. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a title. Someone had to have gotten title on this transaction. So there is money to get, but maybe that's not what you wanted. Maybe you wanted the apartment.
Yeah,
You know?
and now multiple victims are there, right? And hence why it can be a lengthy
Correct.
process. So what I'm hearing here is if you have so when you were saying if you have another property, if you have
Mhm.
second properties, if you have rental properties,
Mhm.
these are possible target areas if you're not, there to pick
Paying
up
attention.
mail. So
Yeah.
all I can see is someone just driving around looking at dilapidated properties and saying, I wonder if someone's like, I don't know if you have any insight to that. Like, how are people, is there a team of people just scouring
Yeah.
public records?
There's a
What?
whole industry of and I'm not saying these people are doing fraud, but there's a whole industry of driving for dollars, right? So people are going around to see if there are properties where potentially the seller might want to sell, right?
Mhm,
So the lawn doesn't look taken care of, there's mail piled up, there's, it's dilapidated. So there are honest people doing it who are like really negotiating with the seller and trying to make a deal, right? But there are also people who, if they see an opportunity, they're taking it, or they're giving it to the people who don't have good intentions. And so that is happening all the time. And so when I'm talking to people about estate planning and how to protect their uh, uh, heirs, right? We want to, I try to highlight for them that if you have young people, they can be vulnerable to these types of things because if someone sees that they've inherited something and they're 18 or
right.
something, they can prey on them and manipulate them because they have more information than the person probably has, right?
Mm.
And that's how they can end up losing assets as well. It's happening.
So that brings me to the next point, right? Because I have children, and again, I'm very proud to say you helped me with my own estate planning. So again,
Yeah.
why we have you on this call,
Mm.
uh, one of the things that I read was this whole br- black and brown communities are highly vulnerable to this through
Yeah.
this concept of what we call air.
Uh-huh.
I wrote it down, air property, right?
Okay.
Where are you familiar with air property?
So I'm pretty sure I know what you're talking about, but not that term. So
Yeah.
way that
So
way
so
that
what it is, and when I read it, I was like, this makes so much sense because I
Mhm.
think my uncle did this with his kids, where the kids get the property and never go through probate.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
there is no legal record. It's just like, okay, this was my parents' house. Now this is my house.
Mhm. Mhm.
Right. Is this common? Is this something you know about? You've
That
seen?
is, yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. So one way that you can avoid probate is also putting the assets in a trust. But if that's not what your uncle did, here's another way that it can be done. If the title company, through their due diligence, thinks that it's appropriate, if the heirs of the person who passed away
Hmm.
all agree that they're the only heirs, right? And they can get an affidavit from a family member or someone stating that, yeah, these are the only heirs of XYZ person that passed away, then they can do a sale, right, of that property. But you're not going to be able to refinance that property. You're not going to be able to change the deed of that property. But you may be able to sell that property if you all agree.
Great. Yeah. So the reason why this struck me, right, was
Mm-hmm.
because I can see it in my community. I
Mm-hmm.
can see it because again, we don't have generalizing,
Yeah.
right? Black and brown communities,
Well.
yeah, right. Generalizing, black and brown communities don't have the same access to the finances for the legal resources,
Mhm.
right? So where some people consider estate planning investment,
Mhm.
others may look at it as I just can't afford this,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
And as I was doing my homework, I was reading, okay, in these communities, properties are passed down. Now we have lack of legal documentation,
Mhm.
and there's a term called systematic wealth stripping,
Yes.
where
Absolutely.
you've heard of this term?
Yeah. So the reason why we're not privy to or haven't historically been privy to life insurance, there was a period of time
Mhm,
we could not acquire life insurance. There's a period of time we could not purchase real estate, right?
mhm,
These are the two major pillars of generational wealth building. That's why you have generations of people being able to go to $50,000 a year, 100,000, 200,000 a year of education because of this historical generational wealth that their families have built in various ways. But these two pillars are one of the things. So one, you're not allowed to do it, right? So finally you're allowed to do it, but nobody tells you that you can do it, and no one explains to you. They don't give you the game,
Yeah.
essentially. And so,
Or the playbook,
or
pun intended.
there you go. So because of that, you don't know, even when you have it, you don't even know what that means, right? So it's easy for someone to steal it from you, take it from you, do whatever they'd like, because you don't even know the value of what you have. And so situations like not knowing about how to properly own your property, how to properly transfer your wealth. This is why people in Black and brown communities would add people to their deed, or I left the deed in so-and-so's name. No, you've given the property away. You know what I mean, right? If that person passes away, that belongs to their family, not yours, right? So a lot of those things that we've done, but also coming into our communities to have people sign reverse mortgages so that their equity is being eaten up. So yeah, maybe that's right for some people if they really have no other opportunity but to lose the house, right? But for many people, it's not the right thing to do, or it's not the necessary thing to do. So that's stealing properties. So there's just so many.
Yeah. This is fascinating because the magnitude can have a ripple effect 2-3 generations down. But something you said earlier that I just want to highlight, this is not a high priority in terms of a criminal crime. It is a crime, and I guess it's more civil than criminal.
Yes.
And this is why, although legally you have options, it's just not a priority for those who are, there to protect you.
Exactly.
Right? Like it's not a, it's different than, acts of violence. It's a paper crime. And it's not even a complicated paper crime. You just need a notarizer and someone who can sign, and let's go rock and roll.
Yeah.
And draw as much money as you possibly can. And that's scary. And this is why I wanted to have this conversation, because usually I give people I have conversations and I would ask you about your journey and your history, but to your point, even though you introduce a new term, I want to give people game as well.
Yeah.
All right. So what would be some of the warning signs, right? We talked about how people are vulnerable, but what are some of the warning signs if I own that you can help me with right now to protect the assets that I own or the house that I own?
Yeah. So you'd want to see if there are mail or documents or anything referencing someone else as a new owner, or new mail that's just coming to your house for someone else, or it could be like an entity. They can have sometimes they'll put in an LLC's name so they can have it be more anonymous. So if you see anything like that coming to your house, a lot of the counties, especially where the property values are high, like specifically in New York, in Long Island, and then in the boroughs, the property values are higher than they've ever been. And so they are now sending you a letter saying, hey, there was a deed recorded, or there was something recorded on your land records. Pay attention to those things. You can periodically, I don't know, you don't want to do it every week, but every 6 months you can go online usually to check your county records, or you can go in person to check it and just make sure nothing was recorded. So you may, want to do that. I don't know if there's like title monitoring services.
I've heard of title lock. It's not much you can do, but it will give you alerts. It's a convenience thing rather than have to do all this manual, check my mail, pull up reports. It does it. I mean, I'm not endorsing it, but I do know that's there.
Yeah.
But in this, which is funny now, because I realize now why the conversation between, especially in the state of New York, where they're trying to digitize all the public records.
Yeah.
Right. Because I think because it was paper records, it was a little bit harder. Are you in favor of all these documents becoming digitized?
I am in favor of it being digitized because it's easier to locate things, and it helps things to be more accurate. but there definitely should be a little bit more in terms of them in terms of them, verifying that this should be, recorded or not. Like, is this the actual person? Maybe it needs to be a different sort of system, that's required to get this done. Um,
Mhm.
you know, I will just add that, having your property yourself, depending on what type of property it is, if it's an investment property, having that in an LLC if you can, or if it's your primary residence, to have it in a trust. Those things do provide you a little bit more protection, because usually people are going to see that and know that, okay, someone is about their business when it comes to this
Ah,
property, and it's a lot harder to fraudulently forge a deed that's in a trust or in an LLC.
it's like one of those beware dog signs on my window, right? Wait
Yeah,
a minute.
exactly.
This may not be the person I want to mess with today.
Yeah.
All right. No. That's fair. This was extremely helpful because again, this all started because I started hearing stories, personal stories,
Oh,
and I
mhm.
didn't even know this was possible. All right. So I will ask you, do you see this becoming more on the rise? Do you see it
It
becoming
is.
more of a concern? Because we're both in the state of New York. Do you see it, more on the radar of our elected officials to say, hey, we have to protect these people because you have senior citizens being displaced. You have Black and brown communities that have been able to accumulate some level of wealth, having that stripped away, right? So is there any legal things that that they're talking about, or we can save that for another conversation?
No, I mean, in terms of what's being done about it, I don't know
Mhm.
what conversations are being had, but I will say it is on the rise. I've noticed that they have been prosecuting a bit more.
Oh,
They've been cracking down a bit more, because it really is vampant in particularly Brooklyn, because the property values are so high and is predominantly Black and brown. Right?
gotcha.
So there's a lot of people getting taken advantage of, and so Brooklyn and also the Bronx. So they are cracking down on it, because of the property values, the obviously the accessibility to public records, right,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
people just not knowing.
Yeah,
So elderly people specifically, you want to make sure that loved ones, and sometimes I hate to say this because not all relatives have the best interests. Sometimes they're the ones who are trying to do things wrong, and we're giving them advice on how to do
yeah,
it.
yeah.
So I pray that's not what's happening, but you want to make sure that your elderly folks are educated, and that they're putting structures in place for themselves so that they're not taken advantage of. Like, I did help my mom get her estate planning done and had her house put in a trust, because I'm like, that's not happening.
Yeah.
So
So I'm gonna take a few seconds to ask you some legal advice now, right?
okay.
Because again, I told you about my uncle, and I'm very proud to say that again, my attorney helped my family with their trust. We're gonna continue doing a few other things as I try to protect the wealth of my family.
Mm,
But my uncle, because he said, "Hey, can I speak with your attorney?" I said, "I'll definitely give you the information."
sure.
Um, and then his son said to me, "Oh, we already put our names on the deed." And I said, "Huh, okay, because you can put someone's name on the deed, put your kid's name on the deed."
Uh,
Uh, so just to recap, so I get this straight. If they already have the children already have their name on their parents' deed, right? So that way, if the parents died, ownership is recorded under the kids. Should they still move forward with the trust? If yes, why or why not?
um, so one, I'll just say that's a mistake.
Hmm.
You should not be adding your kids to your deed, and you should not be transferring it during your lifetime, right? That's a ineffective way of transferring wealth. Why? Because typically our seniors have purchased their properties and have been in their properties for at least a decade or more, or
Hmm.
multiple decades, and so that is an opportunity for growth in the value of their property. So if they purchase a property at 100,000, and now it's 800,000, that's $700,000 in gain, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
If you add your kids on that deed, now the value that they've received the property at was the same value you received it at at $100,000. If they go to sell, they're paying taxes on that growth.
Ah, okay.
Whereas if you leave it as an inheritance, they would get an $800,000 property tax free.
Got you.
Right.
Got you.
So that's one. Two, the next thing that would help them in terms of and it depends if everybody's on the deed or if just the kids are on the deed or
Sure.
what type of deed they did. So all of that depends. But what I would say is what also makes it vulnerable is if the kids have their own financial issues, there could be liens that show up on the property that did not belong to the parents, that belong to siblings or whatever. So the more people you put on a deed, the more issues that can happen. Now, if one of them die, now you got to probate their estate to be able to do anything with the property.
Oh, wow.
So it gets really messy really fast. That's where we have a lot of roadblocks in this area of the law, where you have multiple people who were inherited and some died. They had 3 children. One of their kids died. And now we have this multi-layer family tree that we have to sort of navigate.
Wow. So do they still have an option? Can they still go? And again, I know this is off tangent, but we're talking about protecting property right now.
Yeah.
Can they still go and almost rectify this and put it into a trust and try?
They can still rectify it. I mean, the tax advantage may be lost, but they can still avoid future issues.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much. This was very, very enlightening. I learned a lot, but and it pays to have smart friends, right? So again, for our listeners, if there's one thing you want them to take away with that they can execute, like, hey, if they want to see and protect that, what's the one thing you will tell them? Hey, just go do this right now and either give yourself peace of mind or uncover a potential problem.
Yeah, I would say if your county has, sign up for deed alerts so that you can find out if there was anything that happens, and then monitor your public records. Try to go at least once a year to see if something, or make sure nothing has changed unless you're aware of it. And then just act as fast as possible, as fast as possible and be as aggressive as possible if you find out that something has happened.
So my last question, and I hate to do this. So if someone caught my deed, would that show up on my credit report, or only if they like did some type of financing and against my property? All right.
Yeah, even that it may not show up on your credit report. So you may never know with regards to, because I doubt they're going to pay off your mortgage unless they actually sold it.
Yeah. Okay. But by then you're screwed. Yeah. All right. So if people want to find you and work with you and were like, man, I really like Sabine, she's so personable, how would they do that? Like, what's the best way to contact you, follow you for information?
Yeah, so they can, so my website is theambitiouslegacyrfirm.com, which has all of my contact information, and you can schedule a discovery call with me there. And any other information that you might need, we can get it to you through there. You can follow me on Instagram at Sabine, which is my first name, The Purpose Lawyer. So you can find me there on LinkedIn, Sabine Franco. And yeah.
All right. Thank you, Sabine. Thank you so much, folks. Again, as always, we try to bring education, information, and actionable steps to our community, give you the playbook, so to speak. And I hope you enjoyed this episode. Once again, Sabine, thank you so much, and we'll talk soon.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right. Wow. What a powerful conversation with my good friend, Sabine Franco, the purposeful lawyer. Again, folks, if you're listening, we're always going to try and bring you information that helps you, benefits you, and gives you some sense of direction for whatever phase of life we're in and for whatever journey we have in life. As always, you can follow us on @BlackDadUnfiltered on our YouTube channel, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. Our website is www.blackdadunfiltered.com. Black Dad Unfiltered is the executive producer of the Playbook with Coach Rod. And once again, we thank you. Let's go. Let's grow. Let's get it. Let's go. Let's go. Let's grow. Let's grow.